her white tail curled tightly around her legs as she whispered. No one would ever choose me. Marcus crouched, steady and certain. Then they're fools. Because I already have. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and join thousands of others who love seeing humans and aliens discover love in unexpected ways. Let's get into it. Marcus had seen vulpines before, their fur bright with fiery reds and golds. But the quiet healer's apprentice who moved into his spare room was different. Fur, hair, and tail all snow white, her voice soft as falling ash. She apologized for every footstep, every breath, as though afraid to take up space. To Marcus, though, she wasn't a burden at all. She was the most beautiful secret the city had ever given him. The apartment wasn't much to look at: 2 rooms, a kitchen barely wide enough for one person to cook in, and a living space that overlooked the endless glow of the city. Marcus never minded. He didn't need much. A place to sleep, a pot for coffee, and a quiet corner to read in after long shifts was enough. Now, though, the apartment felt different. Alenia stood by the doorway with a satchel clutched to her chest, ears tilted low. Her fur was striking in the dim light, pure white from head to tail, her hair falling like snow down to her shoulders. He'd seen vulpines before, bright red, tawny gold, even rich black coats that gleamed under the neon. But never white. Never like this. She seemed to know it too. Her posture was small, folded in, as if trying to vanish. You're sure? She asked softly, eyes flicking up to him, then away again. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his steady presence filling the room. You said your housing fell through? I've got the space. It's simple math. Her ears twitched at that, as though she'd expected a lecture or conditions. Instead, he just stepped aside and nodded at the interior. Come on. No sense hovering in the hall. Alenia hesitated another beat before slipping inside, tail tucked close to her legs. She looked around like she didn't quite belong there, as though at any second someone might tell her to leave. Marcus noticed. He noticed everything. Kitchen's there, he said, gesturing casually. Bedroom's yours if you want it. I've got no problem with the couch. Her ears flicked up in alarm. I can't take your bed. You can, I don't mind the couch. Marcus replied evenly, moving past her to set his toolkit down by the counter. Don't overthink it. She blinked at him, startled, before nodding quickly. Thank you. The first week passed in a rhythm Marcus hadn't expected. Alenia was quiet. Too quiet, sometimes. She padded barefoot across the apartment like a shadow, her tail always wrapped tight around her legs whenever she wasn't moving. She apologized constantly, for bumping a chair, for using too much hot water, for making tea in his mug. Marcus only shook his head each time. You live here. Stop saying sorry. She tried to. He could see the effort in her faint smiles, but the words slipped out anyway. Still, she tried to contribute. One evening he came home to find the table set with clumsy effort, 2 bowls, mismatched candles, and something steaming in a pot that smelled half-burnt, half-spiced. I read this is what humans do for friends, she murmured when he stared at the setup. A meal. Together. Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't laugh. He sat down, picked up a spoon, and ate without complaint, even when the food was half crunch, half mush. Her ears flicked nervously the whole time, waiting for his judgment. It's good, he said firmly when he caught her watching. Relief softened her face into a small smile, and Marcus decided he'd eat burned stew every night if it meant she smiled like that again. Out in the city, things were different. The streets were filled with every kind of being, scaled, feathered, furred, and flesh. No one blinked at a vulpine walking among them. But they did blink at her. Marcus saw it the first time they went to the market together. The stares weren't cruel, just curious. A few humans whispered. A pair of avians tilted their heads, following her with sharp eyes. Even another vulpine at a stall let his gaze linger, brow furrowed. Alenia felt it. He saw her ears dip, her tail curl in tightly as she tried to make herself smaller. Marcus stepped closer, his confident presence like a shield. Ignore it, he said lowly. They're just staring because you're rare. Doesn't mean anything. She gave a faint nod, though she didn't meet his eyes. Later, back at the apartment, he caught her sitting on the edge of the couch, staring at her hands. Her fur shimmered pale in the lamplight. You get used to it, she murmured when she noticed him watching. The looks. The whispers. My own people stare too, but not the same way. For them, it's not curiosity. It's disapproval. Marcus set a mug of tea on the table and sat beside her. He didn't press. He just said, steady and certain, their opinion doesn't decide your worth. Her breath hitched, and she blinked down at the steam curling from the cup. She whispered, "Thank you," and he let the silence hold, giving her the space she needed. By the end of the second week, she'd carved out her place in his home. Not loudly, not boldly, but in small, quiet ways, a flower on the counter, folded laundry left neatly on his chair, tea waiting when he came back from late shifts. And Marcus, who had lived alone for years without complaint, found himself realizing the apartment felt fuller now. Warmer. Maybe, he thought one night as he watched her curled on the couch with her tail wrapped around her like a blanket, this wasn't just math after all. Marcus got used to the sound of Alenia's tail brushing faintly across the floorboards when she moved. It was subtle, soft, like a broom stroke, but he noticed it because the rest of her was so silent. She didn't slam doors, didn't clatter dishes. Sometimes he wondered if she was afraid to disturb the air itself. She had a habit of following him from room to room. Not always close, but near enough. If he was fixing a panel under the sink, she'd sit cross-legged on the kitchen floor with a book in her lap, ears twitching at the hum of his tools. If he leaned over the balcony railing with a mug of coffee, she'd pad quietly out and perch on the step, tail curled tight, sipping tea from her own cup. At first, he thought it was coincidence. Then he realized she didn't like being alone. You know, he said one evening while tightening bolts along the wall unit. You don't have to hover like a ghost. You can talk. Alenia glanced up from her book, ears flicking. I don't want to bother you. You're not. He gave the bolt one last turn and sat back on his heels. If I didn't want company, I wouldn't have offered you the room. She blinked at that, as though it hadn't occurred to her, then lowered her gaze quickly. Still, I like being near you. It feels safe. Marcus paused, meeting her downturned face, then simply nodded. Then keep doing it. Her shoulders loosened, and she smiled faintly, the tension in her tail easing just a little. Her efforts to learn human culture became a constant source of quiet chaos. One afternoon, he came home to find a bundle of flowers laid across the table, bright orange blossoms from a market stall, wrapped haphazardly in paper. Alenia was fussing with them, trying to arrange the stems in a drinking glass. Marcus said, dropping his toolkit by the door. That's new. She jumped slightly, ears flicking back. I read humans give flowers. To friends. To say they care. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Usually not with a drinking glass. Her ears drooped. Oh. I did it wrong. He stepped closer, plucked one of the blossoms free, and tucked it back into the cluster. Looks fine to me. And hey, thanks. Her tail twitched, curling close. You're welcome. Another time, she tried cooking again. The kitchen was a battlefield of spilled flour and overturned spice packets, the air sharp with something burned. She stood in the middle of it with a pot balanced in both hands, face pink. I wanted to make you dinner, she murmured. Humans do that, right? Marcus glanced around at the mess, then at her wide, worried eyes. He took the pot carefully, sniffed, and managed not to wince. Yeah, they do. He set it down, grabbed 2 bowls, and served them both. It was nearly inedible, but he ate, steady and expressionless, until she finally took a bite herself. Her ears flattened immediately. It's awful, she whispered. Marcus shrugged. I've had worse. She looked at him, eyes searching, before a shy laugh slipped out. You're lying. Maybe, he admitted, smirking. But I appreciate the effort. Her purr was so soft he almost missed it, but he saw the way her cheeks colored as she ate anyway. They fell into a pattern. She brought him little things she read about, once a ribbon, once a box of sweets from a shop stall she clearly couldn't afford. She insisted it was friendship tradition. Marcus never corrected her. He just accepted, thanked her, and made sure she knew he valued it. But what struck him most wasn't the gestures themselves, it was how tentative they were. How she hovered on the edge of belief that he might reject them. Late one evening, while they shared tea on the balcony, Marcus finally asked, "Why do you always look like you're waiting for me to tell you no?" Alenia blinked, startled, her tail curling tightly around her knees. "Because most do." He studied her, the way her ears dipped low, her hands fidgeting with the rim of her cup. "I'm not most." Her golden eyes flicked to him for a heartbeat, shining in the neon glow, before darting away again. "I know." She said it so softly it was almost a secret. By the end of that month, Marcus found himself watching her more than he meant to. The way her fur caught the light, almost luminous. The way her smile crept shyly across her face when she forgot to be afraid. The way she sighed in relief whenever he told her, steady as always, "You're fine. Stay." And though he never said it aloud, he started to realize he wanted her to stay far longer than either of them had planned. Marcus was used to being the one others lean on. At work, if a power conduit sparked or a coolant line threatened to blow, people called him. He was steady, confident, not easily rattled. But at home, it wasn't problems with pipes or panels he found himself paying attention to. It was Alenia. She had a way of moving that made him want to stop and look. The quiet precision of her hands as she folded laundry. The way her tail curled around her when she perched on the couch, as though she was wrapping herself in armor. The way she glanced at him from under her lashes whenever he caught her off guard. He told himself he was just observant. That was his job, after all, notice the details no one else saw. But the more time they spent together, the harder it was to deny that he wasn't just noticing. He was drawn. Alenia, for her part, seemed to grow braver in small steps. One night, Marcus came home to find her sitting at the table, a hollow book flickering above her wristband. She looked up quickly, almost guilty. "Reading something good?" he asked, setting his toolkit by the door. Her ears twitched. "It's about human families. Customs. I want to understand more. For you." "For me?" he repeated, brows raised. She nodded, looking down. "You've done so much letting me stay here. I thought I should learn what matters to humans." Marcus pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "You don't have to do that. I didn't give you the room as payment." "I know," she murmured, cheeks coloring. "But I want to." He studied her for a moment, then leaned back, smiling faintly. "Then I guess I'll have to return the favor and learn some Vulpine customs, huh?" Her eyes widened, ears perking. "You would? Why not?" he said with a shrug. "If we're living together, makes sense. I understand what matters to you." For a second, she just stared, stunned. Then her gaze darted down again, her voice so soft he almost missed it. "No one's ever said that to me." Marcus's chest tightened, but he didn't push. He just said, steady as ever, "Then it's about time someone did." The next day, she surprised him with another gesture. She padded into the living room carrying a small tray with 2 cups of tea. Not unusual, except for the careful arrangement of dried herbs and petals floating in the water. "This is Vulpine tea," she explained shyly when he raised an eyebrow. "It's meant for sharing." He took the cup without hesitation, sipping. It was bitter and earthy, not at all like the black coffee he favored, but he forced himself to swallow with a nod. "Not bad." Alenia's ears twitched nervously. "It's supposed to be comforting. If you don't like it—" "I didn't say that," Marcus interrupted, his tone firm enough to cut her apology short. "I said it's not bad. Which means it's good." She blinked, then gave the tiniest smile, her tail curling tighter around her legs as if trying to hide her relief. That night, they watched a hollow together. Halfway through, Alenia's head drifted onto his shoulder. Marcus stiffened slightly, not because he minded, but because of how natural it felt. Her breathing was soft, even, and her tail gave a little twitch before curling against his side. Marcus glanced down at her white hair brushing his arm, glowing faintly in the hollow's light. He didn't move. He didn't want to. For the first time in years, he realized, he wasn't thinking about work. He wasn't thinking about the job, or the repairs waiting in the morning. He was just thinking about the quiet weight of Alenia's head on his shoulder, and how much he wanted this moment to last. Later, when she stirred awake, she looked up at him in alarm. I didn't mean to. Relax, Marcus said firmly, steadying her with a hand on her shoulder. It's fine. Her ears lowered, but she nodded, cheeks pink. Thank you? Marcus didn't tell her the truth. That it wasn't just fine, it was the best part of his day. By the end of the week, he knew he was in trouble. Not the kind that came with broken conduits or faulty wiring. Something deeper. Something he couldn't patch with a wrench or tape. He was falling for her. Quietly, steadily, the way snow piles up until you realize it's all around you. And for once in his life, Marcus wasn't sure if confidence alone would be enough to face it. Marcus was fixing the heating vent when he first noticed it. Alenia had been curled up on the couch, her white tail wrapped tightly around her knees, a book resting on her lap. The hollow display flickered faintly against her fur, making it shimmer almost silver. She wasn't reading, though. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, and her ears tilted down in that way he was starting to recognize. She was thinking about something she didn't want to say. You've been quiet all day, Marcus said casually, tightening the last bolt and dusting his hands off. She blinked, startled, and glanced away. I'm always quiet. Yeah, he said, crouching to put his tools back in the kit. But this is different. You've got that look. Her tail curled tighter. Sorry. There you go again, Marcus said, closing the kit with a snap. Don't apologize. Just tell me what's on your mind. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then she whispered, I saw another vulpine at the market today. He stared at me. Then he looked away like... Her voice trailed off. Like what? Marcus asked gently. She swallowed, her hands tightening on the book. Like I was a blemish. An embarrassment. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't say that. He didn't have to, she murmured. Her golden eyes flicked to him, then down again. Among my people, color is everything. The brighter, the more vivid, the more desirable. White is none of those things. It means plain. Lifeless. Marcus sat down across from her, his expression steady. That's nonsense. Her ears dipped lower. It's what they believe. No one would ever. She cut herself off quickly, hugging her tail close. Ever what? Marcus pressed, voice softer now. Her throat worked as she whispered. No one would ever choose me. The words hit like a weight between them. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on her. Listen to me. If they can't see your worth, that's their blindness. Not yours. She trembled slightly, still avoiding his gaze. You don't understand. Among vulpines, fur like mine means no mate. No family. No future. Marcus's voice was firm, certain. Then their culture's broken. Because what I see when I look at you. Beautiful. Striking. Not plain. Alenia's breath caught. For a moment, her eyes widened, ears flicking up in shock. Then she looked down again, cheeks burning red through her pale fur. You're only saying that to be kind. Marcus shook his head. I don't say things I don't mean. Her hands trembled around the book. She looked like she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she whispered so softly he almost missed it. Thank you? After that night, something shifted. She didn't stop being shy, didn't stop apologizing, but she lingered a little longer near him. When she made tea, she set the cup by his hand without waiting for him to ask. When he came home late, she was always awake, tail curled around her as she waited on the couch, offering a small smile when he walked through the door. One evening, while he was sorting tools, she asked quietly, "Do humans ever think about color when choosing?" Marcus glanced up. "Color of what?" She hesitated. "Of hair. Of eyes. Of skin. Does it matter?" He leaned back, studying her carefully. "Not the way you're thinking. Sure, people notice. But when it comes to choosing someone," he shook his head, "what matters is who they are, not what shade they come in." Her ears tilted, as if testing the truth of his words. "So if a human had white fur, it wouldn't matter?" Marcus smiled faintly. "I'd probably stare. Not because it's plain, but because it's rare. Unforgettable." Her tail twitched once, betraying her. She turned away quickly, but he caught the soft red flush across her cheeks. That night, as he lay in bed, Marcus found himself staring at the ceiling. He replayed her words, "No one would ever choose me," and felt a surge of anger at the thought. Because he would. He'd choose her in a heartbeat. The realization settled deep in his chest, heavy and certain. Marcus had never been a man to overthink, but this was different. With Alenia, it wasn't about impulse. It was steady, patient, the way a foundation holds a building. He wanted her here. Not just as a roommate. Not just as a friend. He wanted her. And sooner or later, he knew, he'd have to tell her. The rain was steady against the windows that evening, a soft hiss that filled the silence between them. Marcus had come home late from a shift fixing a broken elevator shaft, soaked to the bone. He expected Alenia to already be asleep. But she was there, curled on the couch, white fur glowing faintly in the lamplight. Her ears twitched as the door closed, and she sat up quickly, as though caught doing something wrong. "You're still awake?" Marcus asked, shaking the water from his jacket before hanging it by the door. She fiddled with the edge of her sleeve. "I wanted to make sure you got home safe." His chest tightened. He toed off his boots and walked over, dropping heavily into the chair across from her. "I've been working late for years. You don't have to wait up." Her golden eyes flickered to him, then down to the floor. "I wanted to." Marcus studied her for a long moment. She looked smaller than usual tonight, her tail curled tightly, her hands clasped together like she was holding herself steady. Something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "I overheard some of the healers at work. They were talking about me." Marcus's jaw tightened. "What did they say?" Her throat worked. "They said it was strange. That I was lucky to even have an apprenticeship. That with fur like mine, I shouldn't be allowed near patients. They'd think I was cursed." Marcus felt a hot flare of anger rise in his chest. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That's garbage." Her ears dipped lower. "It's what most Vulpines believe. Then most Vulpines are idiots." She blinked up at him, startled. "Marcus." "No, listen." He cut in, his voice firm, steady as bedrock. "I'm not going to sit here and let you talk like their nonsense is the truth. You're not cursed. You're not plain. You're—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. Alenia's ears twitched, her tail tightening as she whispered, "I'm what?" Marcus swallowed, then said it, steady and unflinching. "Beautiful." The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Alenia froze. Her eyes widened, breath catching audibly. A deep flush spread across her pale cheeks, her ears trembling as if they didn't know whether to rise or flatten. "No," she stammered, shaking her head quickly. "You don't mean that. You're just being kind." "I don't say things I don't mean," Marcus replied, voice low but certain. She hugged her tail closer, almost burying her face in the white fluff. Her hands trembled. "No one has ever called me that." "Then they've all been blind," Marcus said. He leaned closer, meeting her wide eyes. "I've thought it since the day you stepped into this apartment. The way your fur catches the light, the way you move, the way you—" He stopped himself, shaking his head with a wry smile. "Doesn't matter how I explain it. Point is, I see it. Every damn day." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes shone, damp at the corners, and for a terrifying second Marcus thought she might cry. Instead, she whispered, barely audible, "Marcus, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," he said gently. "Just believe me." Her tail quivered. Slowly, cautiously, she lowered it, letting the fur slip from her grip. She leaned forward just slightly, her shoulder brushing his. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Marcus didn't press. He didn't need to. He just sat there with her as the rain pattered softly outside, his presence steady, grounding her in the storm of her own doubts. And for the first time, Alenia didn't curl in on herself. She leaned toward him instead. Marcus was used to control. Cool under pressure, steady in every storm, the one others leaned on when things went wrong. It wasn't arrogance, it was just who he was. But the night he stepped into his apartment, and saw Alenia standing in the living room, every ounce of that control shattered. She wore black lace. Thin, delicate, revealing far more than it covered. Against her pale white fur it was stark, the patterns tracing along her body like dark ivy on snow. Her ears were red at the tips, trembling, her tail low and restless behind her. Marcus's jaw went slack. He stopped dead in the doorway, heart slamming against his ribs. "Alenia," he managed, his voice rougher than he intended. What are you doing?" Her golden eyes flicked up, wide and nervous, before darting away again. She clasped her hands in front of her, fidgeting. "I read that humans wear this to show they care for someone. To start romance." Marcus's mouth went dry. For the first time in years, he felt heat rush to his face, his ears burning. He turned half away, rubbing at the back of his neck like a man who'd been punched in the gut. "That's Alenia, that's not. I mean, sometimes, but it's not how you start." Her ears flattened. "I misunderstood again." No, Marcus said quickly, stepping forward and holding up a hand, though he kept his eyes stubbornly averted. "You didn't misunderstand. It's just, you don't usually jump to that. It comes later. After you're already close." He risked a glance at her. A mistake. The lace clung to her curves, the pale sheen of her fur glowing faintly under the apartment's dim light. More of her was bare than covered, and she looked both impossibly vulnerable and breathtaking at once. He tore his gaze away instantly, swearing under his breath. She hugged her arms over herself, her voice trembling. "I thought it would make you happy. That it was what humans wanted. But I made you upset." Marcus's head snapped back toward her. "No. Not upset." His voice came out firmer than he intended. He softened it quickly. "Alenia, look at me." She hesitated, then did. He exhaled, steadying himself. "You didn't make me upset. You made me." He stopped, rubbed his forehead, and laughed breathlessly. "You made me embarrassed. Which doesn't happen to me. Ever." Her ears twitched. "Embarrassed?" Marcus gave her a wry smile, though his face was still red. "Because I wasn't ready to see you like this. You're beautiful, Alenia. More than you know. That's why I reacted the way I did. Not because I didn't like it." Her lips parted. The faintest gasp slipped out, her tail giving a startled flick. She'd expected rejection. She'd expected him to be kind, to smooth it over like he always did. But this was different. His voice was strained, his eyes careful but unflinching, and there was no mistaking the truth in his words. He was attracted to her. The realization hit her harder than anything she'd read in books or seen in dramas. Her ears trembled upright, her flush deepening, her tail curling and uncurling as if it couldn't decide what to do. Marcus took another slow step forward, lowering his hand. "You don't need this to prove anything to me. Just being you is enough. But if you were trying to get my attention?" His throat worked as he admitted. "You succeeded." A soft, fragile sound escaped her. A purr, unsteady at first, then deepening as her body relaxed. Marcus extended a hand, steady, palm open. For a moment she stared at it, then at him. Then, trembling, she reached out and slid her hand into his. Her palm was warm. Softer than he'd imagined. He closed his fingers around hers, grounding her, and her purr vibrated faintly through her chest. They stood like that for a long moment, the lace and the nerves and the pounding silence fading until there was only the warmth of her hand in his, and the certainty in his voice still echoing between them. Beautiful. Alenia lowered her gaze, cheeks burning, but she didn't let go. For the first time, she truly believed it. Marcus wasn't sure how long they stood like that, hand in hand, the storm of nerves and lace around them fading into something quieter. Alenia's golden eyes flickered up at him now and then, only to dart away again, her tail swishing restlessly across the floor. She didn't let go. That was what mattered. Eventually, she whispered, barely above the hum of the city outside. You must think I'm foolish. Marcus squeezed her hand, firm and certain. No. I think you're braver than you realize. Her ears twitched, trembling at the words. Brave? Trying something like this? Putting yourself out there? His smile softened. That takes guts. She looked at him for a long moment, her lips parted slightly, as though unsure whether to believe him. Then she lowered her gaze again, voice even softer. I only tried because it was you. Marcus's chest tightened. Alenia! She cut him off, stumbling over her words. You're steady. Kind. You don't look at me the way others do. You make me feel safe. I don't want to leave this place. Not because it's your apartment, but because you're here. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she ducked her head, ashamed. I shouldn't say that. It's selfish. You've done so much already. Stop, Marcus said, more sharply than intended. She flinched, but he leaned closer, his tone gentling. You're not selfish. You're honest. And I'm glad you said it, because I've been feeling the same way. Her ears perked faintly, eyes widening in disbelief. You have? Yeah, he said quietly, the confidence he carried at work tempered now into something vulnerable but true. I didn't plan on it. But somewhere along the way, I started looking forward to you being here. Started noticing how the place felt empty when you weren't around. Started realizing I didn't just want you here as a roommate. Her breath caught. She stared at him, stunned, her tail frozen halfway through a twitch. Marcus held her gaze, steady and unflinching. I want you here because it's you. Because I like you, Alenia. More than I probably should admit. The silence that followed was sharp and fragile, like glass waiting to break. Then Alenia's hands trembled, her ears flicking up and down rapidly, her eyes bright with a sheen of unshed tears. You really mean that? I don't say things I don't mean, Marcus replied firmly. Her purr started up again, shaky, vibrating through her chest. She covered her mouth with her free hand, as though trying to contain the sound, but her tail betrayed her, curling once around his ankle, then tightening there like she couldn't let go. Marcus chuckled softly, pulling her hand gently from her mouth. Don't hide it. It suits you. Her eyes shimmered, and then, as though propelled by something deeper than courage, she leaned forward. Hesitant, trembling, but certain enough to close the distance. Marcus met her halfway. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the dramatized romances she'd read about. Her lips pressed against his like she wasn't sure she was allowed to stay there, and his hand rose to steady her cheek, thumb brushing her fur as if to tell her she could. When they pulled back, she was blushing furiously, her ears flat and trembling, but her eyes were luminous. I've never, she began. Neither have I, Marcus interrupted gently. Not like this. For once, she didn't apologize. She just smiled, shy, radiant, and real. Her tail uncurled from his ankle and instead looped lightly around his waist, pulling herself closer with a soft, contented purr. Marcus exhaled slowly, his forehead resting against hers. Guess we're really doing this, huh? Her answer was a tiny nod, her voice no more than a whisper. If you'll have me. He smiled, steady and certain. Always. The following days slipped into a rhythm that felt different, though the walls and furniture hadn't changed. Marcus still worked long shifts and Alenia still kept the apartment tidy, but the silences between them weren't heavy anymore. They were warm. When Marcus dropped onto the couch after a long day, Alenia was already there, her tail curled neatly beside her. She edged closer until their shoulders touched, then leaned her head lightly against him. She didn't say a word, didn't need to. Her purr was enough. At the market, she walked a step behind him like always, but this time her hand brushed his until, shyly, she let her fingers rest against his palm. Marcus closed his around hers, steady and sure, and she flushed red clear to her ears. At night, she stopped pretending she was only sitting on the couch because she couldn't sleep. She curled beside him in his bed, tail looped around his waist, face hidden against his chest. Marcus lay awake sometimes, listening to her quiet breathing, and thought he'd never known a peace like this. Still, something nagged at him. Alenia had tried so many human things, flowers, dinners, even that night with the lace. Always reaching across the gap between them, trying to meet him where she thought he was. And he'd realized, lying there with her curled against him, that he'd never done the same for her. The next day, while Alenia was out at the healer's hall, Marcus sat at his table with a data pad and searched Vulpine courtship traditions. The entries were strange. Tokens of feathers or polished stones. Arrangements of herbs. Tail-touch rituals. Nesting. Things that seemed simple, almost childish, to his eyes, but he remembered the way she looked when she spoke of being unwanted, and he understood. These weren't just trinkets. They were how her people showed someone they mattered. So he tried. That evening, when she came home, she found a small bundle on the table, a few feathers tied together with cord, awkward and uneven, clearly handmade. Alenia stopped dead, staring. Her ears shot upright, her tail stiff with shock. "Marcus, what is this?" He rubbed the back of his neck, looking almost sheepish for once. "Read somewhere, it's important. Thought I'd give it a shot." She stepped forward slowly, as though afraid it would vanish if she moved too fast. Her hands hovered over the bundle before finally picking it up, trembling. Her eyes shone, wide and wet. "You made this? For me?" Marcus leaned on the counter, watching her carefully. "Yeah. Not sure I got it right, but—" "You did," she whispered, cutting him off. Her voice cracked, and tears slipped free down her pale cheeks. No one has ever given me one." Marcus's chest tightened. He crossed the room in 2 steps, steadying her shoulders with his hands. "Then they've been fools. Because you deserve it." Her breath shook. She pressed the feathers to her chest, her purr breaking into a trembling sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. She looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes and whispered, "Marcus, thank you." He brushed his thumb lightly across her cheek, wiping the tears away. "Don't thank me. This is what you should have had all along." Her tail loosened, curling slowly around his wrist as though anchoring herself to him. She was trembling, but she was smiling through it, fragile and luminous. That night, when she slid into bed beside him, she clutched the little feather bundle against her chest. She said nothing, but her tail looped tighter around his waist than ever before, her purr unbroken until she finally drifted into sleep. Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the warmth of her against him. For once, he didn't wonder what came next. He knew. Marcus wasn't much for rituals. He fixed things, made them work, and left it at that. But Alenia had been trying so hard, all this time, to meet him in his world. He owed her something in return. So when she came home from the healer's hall one evening, she stopped short at the sight of the table. A single bowl sat in the center, steam curling from a stew he'd thrown together. 2 sets of utensils lay beside it, arranged carefully. The lighting was dim, the apartment quiet except for the soft hum of the city outside. Alenia froze in the doorway, her ears lifting in surprise. Her golden eyes flicked from the table to Marcus, who stood there rubbing the back of his neck. "Read, this is how your people do it," he said. "1 dish, 2 diners. Figured I'd give it a try." Her tail twitched, her cheeks coloring as she stepped closer. She lowered herself to the chair beside him, careful and reverent, like she didn't want to break the moment. When she tasted the stew, her ears flicked upright in delight, and her purr began low in her chest, unbidden. Marcus smiled faintly, eating without comment, content to let the silence stretch. She didn't need to say anything. The happiness in her eyes was enough. The lamps were dim, the city's neon glow slipping through the blinds in fractured colors. Alenia sat curled at one end of the couch, brushing her fingers absently through her tail. She looked peaceful in her way, purring softly, though her ears still twitched as though listening for something unsaid. Marcus sat down beside her without a word. She shifted instinctively closer, her shoulder brushing his arm. That quiet contact had become routine, but tonight, something tugged at him. He thought about everything he'd read. About grooming. About how Vulpines treated it not as simple affection but as a private vow, something reserved for mates. Just thinking about it made his pulse quicken. He wasn't the type to hesitate, but his hand hovered for a moment before he finally let it fall, slowly, gently, into her hair. Alenia stiffened instantly, her ears snapping upright. "Marcus? Relax," he murmured, smoothing his fingers through her white strands. "Just let me." She seemed to stop breathing, her blush flaring crimson, but she didn't pull away. Her purr deepened instead, vibrating through her chest as her eyes fluttered half-closed. Marcus worked carefully, combing through her hair with his fingers first, then down along the fur at her neck. The softness startled him, warm, silky, unlike anything he'd ever touched. He swallowed hard, steadying his hand, though his heartbeat was anything but steady. Alenia leaned into the strokes despite herself, trembling faintly, her tail curling tight against the cushions. She looked torn, shy and desperate at once, her body betraying her restraint. When his fingers brushed over her ears, she gasped, tilting helplessly toward his hand. Her lips parted, her purr breaking into a shiver of sound that hovered between sigh and moan. Marcus felt his face heat. He hadn't expected this, her undone, her breaths coming quicker, every little sound pulling him further out of his composure. He moved lower, tracing the fur along her back, down toward her tail. When his hand stroked near the base, Alenia's whole body arched, a low, throaty sound slipping free before she could catch it. Her hands flew to her mouth, her ears flat with shame, but her tail betrayed her, uncurling, quivering, then wrapping firmly around his arm as if begging him not to stop. Marcus froze for a moment, shaken, then forced a steady breath. "Alenia!" His voice was rougher than usual, unsteady in a way that surprised even him. She peeked at him through her fingers, golden eyes wide and luminous, her blush fierce. She looked utterly flustered, but she didn't let go of him. If anything, her tail pulled tighter, her body pressing closer to his side as if answering a need she couldn't admit aloud. Her purr came back stronger, vibrating against him, every tremor of it a confession. Marcus let his hand linger, stroking slow, measured. The intimacy was heavier than he'd expected, more overwhelming than her lace had been. Marcus had only meant to honor her traditions, to show her she mattered, that she was cherished. But as his hand stroked through her fur, brushing along her ears, down her spine, lingering at the base of her tail, he felt her unravel in ways he hadn't expected. Her purr deepened into something heavier, needier, and her body leaned into him like she couldn't hold herself up without his touch. The shy, reserved woman he knew was still there, but she was undone now, trembling with every stroke. "Marcus!" Her voice was husky, low and breathless, a tone he'd never heard from her before. She pressed closer, her tail looping tightly around him, and whispered, I want more." Marcus's chest tightened. His composure cracked clean through at the sound of that voice, the way she clung to him, golden eyes burning with shy desperation. Before he could answer, she climbed into his lap, her knees bracketing his hips, her arms looped tight around his neck. Her face was buried against his shoulder, but her trembling body told him everything. Marcus swallowed hard, steadying her with strong hands on her waist. He realized, with startling clarity, that he had started something far deeper than he'd intended. But now, with her trembling against him, needy and unguarded, There was no resisting her. Not when she wanted him like this. He leaned close, his lips brushing her ear, his voice low and sure. Easy. We'll go slow. Her soft gasp trembled against his neck, her purr unsteady but insistent. She nodded, clutching tighter, as though afraid he might let go. He didn't. Marcus guided her gently, letting his hands smooth her back, giving her time to breathe, to feel safe. His fingers brushed the hem of her shirt, pausing for her permission. She lifted her arms slowly, and together they eased it upward, the fabric sliding free. When the shirt slipped away, Marcus froze. Beneath, she wore the dark lace from that night, the lingerie she thought was a mistake. His brows rose, a surprised laugh slipping past his lips before he could stop it. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Alenia's blush flared crimson, but a soft giggle bubbled through her moans. I thought you might. Marcus shook his head, chuckling under his breath. Clever fox. Her smile was shy but radiant, even as her body pressed tighter against him. They kissed then, slower, deeper than before. Her lips were warm and trembling, her purr vibrating into him. His hands steadied her waist as her fingers tangled in his hair, tugging gently, pulling him closer still. The rest unfolded in breaths and whispers, in careful motions and quiet laughter between sighs. He touched her gently, always watching her face, guiding her as much as holding her. She responded with trembling eagerness, her moans soft, fragile, but filled with trust. The lace soon joined the shirt on the floor. Skin met fur, warmth against warmth. They moved together on the couch, the rhythm unhurried, every motion deliberate. Her tail wrapped firmly around him, holding him close, her purr a constant, rising like a song. Marcus whispered steady reassurances, his voice low and rough with feeling. You're beautiful, you're safe. I've got you. Alenia's replies were wordless, gasps, sighs, a husky giggle here and there when his composure slipped, when his smirk returned despite the heat in his face. She clung to him with everything she had, her body showing every ounce of her need. Time blurred, measured not in minutes but in the sound of her purr, in the tremble of her hands on his back, in the warmth of their shared breaths. And when at last they slowed, holding one another close in the quiet aftermath, Alenia buried her face against his chest, trembling but smiling through her blush. Her tail remained looped firmly around him, as though she would never let go. Marcus pressed a kiss to her hair, his hand stroking gently down her back, still steady even in his own shaken state. Beautiful, he murmured. Her purr answered, steady and strong, filling the silence with the sound of belonging. The morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, pale and golden. Marcus stirred first, blinking against the glow. Alenia was still curled against him, her tail wrapped snug around his waist like a silken tether. Her white hair fanned across his chest, her ears flicking now and then in some dream. She looked peaceful in a way he'd never seen before, unguarded, completely at ease. He brushed his hand through her hair, slow and gentle. Her purr started up immediately, a sleepy vibration against his ribs. Golden eyes blinked open, hazy with drowsiness. She blinked up at him, cheeks coloring as the memory of last night returned. Good morning, she whispered, her voice still husky with sleep. Morning, Marcus said softly. He smiled faintly, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Sleep all right? Her blush deepened, but she nodded. Better than I ever have. They lay there a moment longer in comfortable silence, the city's hum faint beyond the glass. Then Marcus chuckled, brushing his thumb along the curve of her ear. You know, that last tradition of yours. Her ears twitched sharply, and she buried her face against his chest, mortified. Marcus. Might be worth keeping, he finished, smirking down at her. Her purr spiked, vibrating through both of them. She peeked up at him, ears burning crimson, but the shy smile tugging at her lips betrayed her. Maybe. Marcus kissed her then, slow and certain. When they parted, she stayed close, her voice trembling but full of warmth. I never thought I would find a mate. Not with fur like mine. His hand steadied her cheek, his gaze unwavering. Then they were wrong. Because you're mine. And I wouldn't trade you for anyone. Her eyes shimmered, her purr unbroken, her tail curling tighter as if sealing the vow. I love you, she whispered, fragile and fierce all at once. Marcus smiled, his voice low and certain. I love you too. They stayed like that as the morning light grew brighter, tangled together in quiet certainty. For the first time in her life, Aline didn't feel unwanted. She felt chosen. And Marcus knew, with unshakable clarity, that he would never let her go. Thanks for staying with me until the end. If you felt something in this story, then you belong here. Subscribe so you never miss the next one, and remember, the best way to support the channel is simply by coming back for more. Until then, see you in the next story.